Imagine living in a town where the fog doesn't just cover the streets, it takes people with it. And the most terrifying part? The disappearances only happen on foggy mornings, and you'll understand why by the end of this video. This is the mystery of Harswick, a place where reality seems to bend when the visibility drops. For over 40 years, the small, isolated town of Harswick has been the center of a pattern so strange, so unsettling, that official investigators refuse to publish their findings. Think about that for a second. Law enforcement, people who deal with the darkest parts of humanity, saw something here that they believed the public shouldn't know. What could be so disturbing? The pattern is chillingly specific. Since the early 1980s, every single missing person case in Harswick, all 27 of them, occurred under the exact same conditions. They all happened in the early morning, between the hours of 5 a.m. and 8 a.m., and they all happened on days when the fog was exceptionally thick, not just a light mist, but a dense, heavy blanket of white that swallows the landscape, hiding houses that are just across the street. The locals have their own theories, of course. They've lived with this fear for generations. We'll tell you that on those specific mornings, the fog is different. It's not just water vapor hanging in the air. They say it moves with a purpose, doesn't just drift on the wind. It rolls in, almost like a tide. Some swear they've seen it curl around streetlights and cling to windows in a way that feels unnatural, almost predatory. They call it the Grabber. It's a name whispered in hushed tones, a boogeyman for the adults of Harswick. Is it just folklore born from fear? Or are they sensing something real that outsiders can't comprehend? The official records begin in 1981. The first documented victim was a milkman named Robert Hale. He was a fixture in the community, a familiar face who knew everyone's name. One Tuesday morning, he started his route as usual. The fog was heavy. His truck was later found abandoned on a quiet residential street. Its engine still running, the headlights cutting to lonely beams into the dense white. Inside the truck, the milk bottles were still cold, condensation clinging to the glass. But Robert Hale was gone. No signs of a struggle, no robbery, no footprints leading away from the vehicle. He had simply vanished mid-route. The disappearances didn't stop there. They became a horrifying, periodic punctuation mark in the town's history. In 1986, it was a teenager on her way to school. She left her house at 7:15 a.m., waving goodbye to her mother. She never made it to the bus stop just 2 blocks away. Her backpack was found sitting on the curb, untouched. Then, in 1993, an experienced hunter, a man who knew the surrounding woods better than his own backyard, walked into the forest edge for an early morning hunt. He was never seen again. His rifle was found leaning against a tree, fully loaded. The list goes on. In 2002, an elderly couple, married for over 50 years, left their house for their daily morning walk, a routine they had followed for decades. Their neighbors saw them step off their porch and disappear into the fog. They never returned. Every single time, the story was the same. A thick, disorienting fog. A deafening silence where there should have been screams or sounds of a struggle. And absolutely no physical evidence left behind. No footprints, no tire tracks, no dropped keys. It was as if these people were simply erased from existence. Decades passed, and the town lived under a cloud of fear, especially on misty mornings. Children were kept home from school. Businesses opened late. People would call their loved ones just to make sure they had arrived at work safely. The mystery deepened with each passing year, and the frustration of law enforcement grew. They had no leads, no suspects, and no rational explanation. How do you investigate a suspect made of fog? Finally, in 2015, the town council, desperate for answers, invested in a state-of-the-art CCTV system. High-definition cameras were installed all over Harswick, covering major intersections, public squares, and the quiet residential streets where most of the disappearances had occurred. The hope was that technology could finally see what human eyes could not. For months, the cameras rolled, capturing nothing but the quiet life of a small town. But everyone knew they were just waiting for the right kind of morning. And on September 3rd of that year, the perfect conditions arrived. A thick, soupy fog rolled in just before dawn. The town held its collective breath, but cameras captured it. At 6:41 a.m., the footage from a camera on Elm Street shows a man walking across the street, It's just a normal guy on his way to work. But then you see it. The fog behind him begins to move, rolling in with an unnatural speed, like a wave surging down the street. It's not drifting, it's advancing. The man seems to sense something. He stops dead in his tracks. He turns his head slightly, then fully turns around, as if someone just called his name from within the wall of white. He hesitates for a second, then takes a step forward, back the way he came, toward the advancing fog, and then he's gone. He disappears mid-frame, doesn't walk into darkness. He doesn't go behind a car or a tree. One moment he is a solid figure, and the next he simply fades. He dissolves into the fog, becoming transparent and then vanishing completely. It happens in the blink of an eye. And right at the moment he vanishes, the camera feed glitches. For just 0.7 seconds, the screen freezes and distorts. When the image returns to normal, the street is empty. The man is gone. The footage was a bombshell, was proof that something impossible was happening in Harswick. But what it showed was even more terrifying than what they had imagined. But before I tell you what the investigators found hidden in that 0.7-second glitch, you need to know about the one person who came back. It's the only person who survived a foggy morning in Harswick. His name was William Crowell, a local fisherman. In 2009, years before the CCTV footage, he was reported missing. He'd gone down to the river at dawn, on a morning thick with fog. An hours-long search began. But then, 6 hours after he vanished, William reappeared. He wasn't found by the search party. He stumbled out of the woods miles away from the river, soaking wet despite it not having rained, shivering uncontrollably with a look of pure terror in his eyes. For the first few hours, he could only repeat one phrase, over and over: "Don't follow the voices." When he finally calmed down enough to speak, he told a story that no one could make sense of. He said the fog hadn't just surrounded him, it had pulled him sideways. That's the only way he could describe it. He said one moment he was walking along the riverbank, and the next, he was in the same place, but it was wrong. The town looked the same, the trees, the river, but everything was silent, gray and felt empty. It was like he had walked into a bad photocopy of his own town. He claimed he wasn't alone in there. He saw other people, figures moving in the distance, within the fog, but they weren't moving normally. He described their movements as jerky and unnatural, like puppets on a string or a video playing on a loop. He felt an overwhelming urge to walk towards them, a pull, a whisper in his mind telling him to join them. But the fear, the sheer wrongness of it all, kept him rooted to the spot. He hid, terrified, for what felt like an eternity, until the fog seemed too thin, and he found himself back in the woods, miles from where he started. His story was dismissed by most as a trauma-induced hallucination. But after the 2015 footage, investigators weren't so sure. Now let's go back to that glitch. That 0.7 seconds of frozen time from the CCTV camera. Digital forensics experts spent weeks analyzing that tiny fragment of data, frame by corrupted frame. When they finally managed to reconstruct the image from the moment the man vanished, they found something that made their blood run cold. In the single, stabilized frame, captured during the glitch, the man is not alone. Behind him, inside the fog that is consuming him, are multiple silhouettes. Dark, vaguely human shapes that hadn't been there a millisecond before and weren't there a millisecond after. They are tall and thin, with limbs that seem just a little too long. Are they people? Are they shadows? Are they just reflections? A trick of the light in the fog? No one knows for sure. The image is just clear enough to show that something is there, but just blurry enough to be deniable. The official report on the Harswick disappearances was never published. It was classified, buried under layers of bureaucracy. The families of the missing were never given an explanation. But secrets have a way of leaking out. A single, corrupted audio file, supposedly from one of the lead investigators' debriefing sessions, was leaked online a few years ago. The quality is terrible, filled with static, but you can just make out a tired, defeated voice saying a single, chilling sentence. He says, "We were looking at it all wrong. It's not the fog. It's whatever walks inside it." So now the question is left to us. What do you think is inside that fog? Are they ghosts of the missing? Are they something else entirely, using the fog as camouflage to hunt? Or is William's story the Kia parallel dimension that briefly bleeds into our own on foggy mornings? Let me know your theories down in the comments. I'd love to hear what you think is happening in the town of Harswick. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed diving into mysteries like this, be sure to subscribe.